Oh, hi. You came back. Dr. Derek, Dr. T, whatever you want. Welcome to another installment of Boil. There's a fly in here, and that's what that was. So today, because it's Sunday and I've got time to kill, and I won't have this much time to kill during the week, we are gonna make some 3-2-1 baby back ribs and some mac and cheese. Now, if you don't know what 3-2-1 ribs are, stay tuned. Gonna show you, gonna tell you, gonna talk about it, gonna talk about some other rib things too while we're at it. If you don't know what mac and cheese is, you're not my audience. The first thing that you need if you're going to make baby back ribs are baby back ribs. We've got that covered, but they've got this tough membrane all the way across the bottom side. And we have to take that off if we're gonna cook these and have them be nice and tender at the end. We're gonna find that membrane on the underside and go right over a bone and use the back end of a spoon to just separate that just a little bit so we can get a finger or two in there. Once we do that, we're just gonna reach in, pull up, tear the whole thing off. So that's what it looks like with the membrane off. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna dry rub this and smoke these ribs for a while first. We've got our what? Mise en place over here, and we are gonna put together a barbecue rub. You can go buy one, but you probably got most of the shit at home in your pantry already. Brown sugar, paprika, half as much smoked paprika, pepper. Remember, we toast it and we grind it ourselves. Salt. Guys, I'm not washing and drying this tablespoon in between. I'm just kind of banging it on the edge of the sink.
Garlic powder,
Onion powder,
dry powdered mustard,
a little cayenne. That's it. That brown sugar is really gonna help everything caramelize, and it's gonna make these ribs not only a little sweet to kind of balance out the spicy, but also beautiful, because we're gonna get that, what's called the Maillard reaction, which is where the sugars in the rub are going to interact with the heat to create that browning effect that we love about meat that's been properly cooked. That looks and smells amazing, but we got to figure out a way to get that to stick on that. And for that, we're going to use that. So there are a lot of different ways to do this, but none of them really make sense without getting your hands dirty. If you want to buy barbecue gloves, do. I have a sink. I use my sink a lot. I use it to wash my hands. I use it to wash dishes. If you don't have one, you should get one. So yellow mustard, okay? So not only is yellow mustard gonna give a little tang that's gonna complement that really nicely, but it's also going to help to kind of break down some of the fibers in those ribs, and that's gonna make those ribs super duper tender. They're already gonna be super duper tender from 3 hours of smoking, 2 hours wrapped where they're gonna braise in some liquid that we're gonna kind of clue you in on in a little bit, and then an hour finishing with what's called direct heat. The best way to do this, just get in there and get messy and get gross, and it's fine. Because again, I'm guessing that if you're like me, you've got a sink. And then we're just gonna coat that, rub it on there so that every little bit of those ribs are covered. And guess what? We want the back to taste just as good as the front. And to do that, we wanna make sure that we season both sides, all sides of this meat. You don't have to reserve any of this. If you want to use this barbecue rub for other stuff, it is amazing for chicken. It's amazing for pork chops. It's just really good to kind of make and have around, and it keeps for at least several weeks, if not longer, in your pantry. Doesn't necessarily need refrigeration. So that's it. We're going to make sure that as much of that as possible is directly on the meat and not necessarily on the baking sheet, because the baking sheet, despite its name, is not going to get baked. Wash your hands. Do it often. I didn't necessarily love ribs when I was younger, but as it turns out, I didn't love ribs because they were cooked for too short a time, so they were chewy and not tender, and because they were slathered in sauce too early. Don't worry, we're going to get our sauce on, and we're going to take care of that in a little bit. And listen, if you don't fuck with pork, beef ribs are fine. You can do the same thing with these. You're going to want to check the internet for temperatures because things are going to be different. But here I've got a smoker at 185 with some all-purpose wood pellets, and oh my God, look at that. Somebody clean my grill. Oh, and before I forget, hey Mom, the tough ribs thing wasn't about you. It was about restaurants that I ate at and shit like that. Happy Mother's Day. I love you. And these are just gonna go on my smoker at 185, membrane side down for 3 hours. And that's the 3 in your 3, 2, 1. So while those smoke, we've got 3 hours to do what? Well, we'll probably drink a little bit, but also we might as well toast up some more pepper because I used all the end of the pepper in that barbecue rub, and go ahead and start our barbecue sauce because this simmers for at least an hour and 15 minutes, but that's at least. And the longer it sits there in the pan and those flavors marry, the better it's gonna be, the more it's gonna reduce, so the more that flavor is really gonna concentrate at the end. So this recipe comes from the Neelys, and they are a couple who are frequently on Food Network, or at least used to be. And it's my favorite barbecue sauce recipe that I've tried, either store-bought or otherwise. It's got some sweetness, but a little tang from the apple cider vinegar that goes into it. And that is my second time doing this take because I fucked up the word vinegar the last time and had to start all over. At any rate, this is easy, and again, you've probably got most of the stuff in your kitchen already. We're gonna start with a base of ketchup, about a cup of water, which is also gonna help kind of rinse out some of that residual ketchup. About a half a cup of apple cider vinegar, that's ACV, to those in the know. 5 tablespoons of brown sugar. So yes, this is obviously keto friendly. An equal part of white sugar, and I said this was a sweet sauce, but we don't want all of it to come from that brown sugar because then it's going to be too heavy on the molasses. About a half tablespoon or so of freshly ground black pepper.
Onion powder.
There's that ground mustard again. So if you're noticing, a lot of the ingredients in the sauce are the same as what we put into the rub, and maybe that's why I like this sauce so much, is it complements the rub really nicely. A lemon juice for brightness, gonna cut through all that funk. And just a little bit of Wash Your Sister sauce. Did you know that that is actually made from anchovies, and that's where it gets its saltiness and its earthiness and depth of flavor that allows it to add another dimension to a lot of sauces and dishes that it's in. If you didn't know that, now you know. If you're grossed out, just wait. So now we're just gonna combine those ingredients. We're gonna bring this up to a boil, and then once it boils, we're gonna drop it down to a simmer and just kind of let it go for at least an hour and 15. Again, I don't think you can go too long on something like this. It's gonna reduce, it's gonna thicken, the flavors are gonna intensify, and it's just gonna be glorious. So that's got a great boil going. We're gonna turn it down to 2 or 3. We're gonna stir it up so that everything that might stick to the bottom doesn't. And we're just gonna make sure that it doesn't boil over before it cools. And then we're just gonna leave it be. Stir it every once in a while. So now that the ribs are on and they're doing their thing and the sauce is simmering and doing its thing and the peppercorns are cooling for eventual grinding, I just wanted to take a moment and talk a little bit about the grill. Specifically, I want to ask you something, and whether you notice it about my grill. Do you see it back there? Do you see it? What do you notice about the grill? I'm just going to tell you. The grill is fucking closed. That's what you notice. And the reason is because every time you open the grill, you let out all the heat, you let out all the smoke, you let out flavor, you have to kind of come back up to temp. You're going to get patches of unevenly cooked meat. You're going to get dry meat, and just fucking stop doing it. You guys who are lifting up the lid every 10 seconds just because it's Schrodinger's meat and you're not sure if it's still in there or not until you check. You're fucking up your barbecue, guys. I just want to tell you right now. It's like when I'm at work and I do a debridement and then we have a little bleeding, which, look, it's going to happen. So we hold pressure, and I tell somebody to hold pressure and let me know how it goes. And then they call me a little while later and they say, you know, every time we pull off the gauze to check, it's still bleeding. And I say, well, why are you pulling it off to check? Every time you take that pressure off, you have to start the process over again because it takes a certain amount of pressure for a certain amount of time. And that's if somebody's not on blood thinners and things like that, to make the blood clot and stop the bleeding. Stop fucking checking it all the time. I promise it is still there. All right, so sauce is still plugging away. Peppercorns are still chilling. We've got our spoon rest, which we're gonna use again. We need to start the mac and cheese at some point soon, but what else do we need to do? Clean. Clean as you go. Wash your hands, wash your shit. Clean your workstation. Have an antibacterial cleanser in a spray bottle of some sort so that you can get all the gook and gunk and nasties off of there. I mean, look, I like ribs and I like macaroni and cheese, but that doesn't mean that I want raw rib residue in my macaroni and cheese. All right, so the best spice grinder, this is our pepper, by the way, is a coffee grinder that you do not use for coffee. Please do not use the same grinder for your coffee. It will taste like pepper and that will taste like shit. Your pepper will taste like coffee and that will also taste like shit. So the reason this is great is like it's a little mini food processor essentially, and I can just pulse it until it's ground as much as I want it to be. Check it, a little more. Now, I like my pepper on the coarse side. Sometimes that means you're gonna run the risk every once in a while of getting into a whole peppercorn, God forbid. Now, I think that's delicious. Ashley does not think that that's delicious, but guess what? She's not here, so. And then once most of your whole peppercorns are at least broken up a little bit, there you have it. Freshly ground, toasted pepper. Holy shit. So while we get ready to make our mac and cheese, or at least to get it started, a couple more little secrets I'm gonna let you in on. The first is these grocery bags. Wherever you shop, hang on to these. Leave one on the counter when you're cooking a big meal like this that's got a lot of steps. You can throw your all of your discard shit in here. You can throw your garlic paper, your onion rind, your citrus that you've squeezed. You can put the little tampon that exists to soak up all of the chicken juice in the package you get at the store in there, so that at the end of your meal prep you can throw this away and not have it sitting and smelling up your kitchen trash for 3 days until it's time to take it out. All right, and over here we have got our cheese en place. In the first installment of this series, we talked a bit about butter, and I said, look, you got to use what you got to use, and you've got access to what you've got access to, but that expensive butter is more expensive because it tastes more expensive, and it comes from cows that are grass-fed, and it is churned differently. And I want to show you this grass-fed butter versus this. Now, this is the butter from the big box grocery store, and just look at that sad, pasty little motherfucker right there. And I mean, I really want you to look at the color and tell me if you think those taste the same. Spoiler, they do not. The last little secret of macaroni and cheese is really that it always kind of historically conjures an image of elbow macaroni. But guess what? You can use any kind of pasta you want, because this is your kitchen, God damn it, and you can do what you like because you're grown. So I got this. This is called Celentani. I don't know what it is, but you know, I like kind of a spiral pasta for my mac and cheese in general, and I like cavatappi. And this is kind of like a cavatappi, but with extra little ridges in it, I assume for her pleasure. I'm not sure. And then the final little secret is not exclusive to just mac and cheese, but it's more of a pasta in general. So you'll see we've moved our sauce to the back burner just so it can kind of simmer away and it's not going to get in anybody's way. We've just got a big stock pot full of water here for our pasta. But my God, people, salt your pasta water. Salt is flavor, and if you don't season your pasta will be unseasoned. I talked about this before if you watched the first installment of this series, but shredded cheese that you buy at the grocery pre-shredded contains cellulose, and cellulose holds the shape of those little shreds, but it's a chemical, and it does not exist in these blocks of cheese. And if you get yourself a decent shredder, it takes minimal effort to go ahead and just grate this yourself. And, you know, seriously, that's how long it takes. So there's our Gruyere. We're gonna do the same with some cheddar as well. So that is boiling, so we're gonna go ahead and get our pasta into it. I'll show you a trick that you probably know, but if you don't, you'll know it here in a second. And that is that if you've got a pot boiling with water in it on the stovetop, you throw a wooden spoon over it, it is going to keep it from boiling over for you. So we're going to drop that in. We're going to set it for a timer that is approximately a minute less than what the package recommends for al dente. All right, now I'm not just showing off, but again, I want to show you that we're cleaning as we go. That's actually going to be important here in a few minutes, because in about 6.5 minutes, we're going to need to dump our pasta into that to drain it. And if we don't have it in the sink, I'm going to have a water problem. Also, when you're cleaning your cheese grater, always remember what the late, great Mitch Hedberg said, which is something to the effect of, I have a cheese grater, or as I call it, a sponge ruiner. If you don't wipe with the grain, you're gonna shred that sponge. A little olive oil drizzle, gonna keep that from sticking. While we're melting some of that expensive butter so that we can start a roux for the base of our mac and cheese, let me talk up the unsung hero of the kitchen appliance community, the Dutch or French oven. Here's one, got a bigger one over there as well. Listen, these are cast iron, they're enameled, so they're typically kind of dishwasher safe, where your cast iron pans proper are not. They're super heavy, they retain heat great. You can fry in them, you can reduce in them, you can braise in them, you can bake in them, you can fill them with oil and use them like a deep fryer. There's not a whole lot that you can't do with one of these. So get you one if you don't got you one. So that butter's almost completely melted, and I'm gonna tell you, it even smells different in here than it does when I'm melting the shitty stuff. And so we're gonna add our flour and whisk it in until it almost has the consistency of wet beach sand. Then we're also gonna add some half and half and some milk. So we're almost sort of making a bechamel sauce, except we're not adding additional salt or any nutmeg. Half and half. So we're gonna use about half. Okay, so the milk is in there now as well. So we're gonna go ahead and get our spices in. We've taken it off the heat. We got S&P and a little SP, which is smoked paprika. And then we've tossed all the cheeses together, and this is about half of what we grated. I'm gonna take about half of that and throw it in there. We're gonna stir it until it's nicely incorporated. Then we're gonna do the same with the other half of the half till the base that contains a lot of half and half has about half. And then because we love our French oven, we've got room to use it as a mixing bowl and just go ahead and combine the pasta with this beautiful cheese sauce that we have created. And once this is stirred in completely, we are gonna dump about half of it into our prepared casserole dish. Then we're gonna put some more shredded cheese in, and then we're gonna put the other half of the pasta in and put the rest of the shredded cheese on top. So we're layering this to make sure that all this gooey, cheesy goodness is in every single solitary square inch and every bite of this. All right, so that's put together and only bakes for about 15 minutes at the very end. So I'm gonna cover it up and pop it in the fridge. And we've still got about an hour on our first 3 on the ribs. So I'm gonna clean and I'm gonna get a drink. So I've gotta tell you that these already look and smell amazing. So they have smoked at 185 for 3 hours. And now we're gonna do the braising portion. So you'll see I've got these each on a little bit of foil. I just cut it in half for space's sake. And we're gonna use our secret weapon, which is some apple juice, okay? So all we're gonna do here is we're gonna build a little pouch for these riblets to sit in. We're gonna roll up the bottom, so it's gonna hold in liquid. We're gonna roll in the sides. And then we're kinda gonna leave the top open. And when we leave the top open, we're just gonna dump in some apple juice because it's gonna braise that meat in that juice. So then we're just gonna seal it up. We're gonna throw it back on the smoker at now 225 for 2 hours. So there's your 3 and your 2. So the 2 of our 3, 2, 1 is complete, and we have got some lovely little braising pouches filled with apple juice and ribs. And just because we didn't check them 100,000 fucking times doesn't mean they weren't still in there. You're gonna pull them out of the pouches. You're gonna dump any residual braising liquid, and then we're gonna take them back to the grill for the big finish. Now, in the meantime, I'm gonna talk a little bit about ribs, and I've got a couple of rib-related things to say. Believe it or not, you wouldn't think the average person would even have one, but I have 2. And the first is that, you know, again, I mentioned in the first of these videos that I work in a long-term care environment, and that means a lot of times I see and I take care of a lot of patients that are, by the way, it's law that you have to click your tongues twice whenever you pick them up. So I work in a long-term care environment where very frequently I am interacting with and taking care of patients who are not in charge of their own medical care. And that may be because they are demented. It may be because they're just severely debilitated. It may be because they've decided that, fuck, that's good. At this point, they want to go ahead and make their wishes and decisions known before they reach a point where they're unable to do that on their own. So regardless of the reason, a lot of these people have lots and lots of chronic illnesses, and they do have pretty severe and debilitating wounds at times. And I bring that up to just say that, listen, I know that it's hard to lose loved ones, and I know that it's hard to let people go. And sometimes, the reason that we don't want our family members to die is not so much because of them as because of us, right? Because they're dead, they're gone. They don't feel anything, but we have to suffer that loss of the person who meant so much to us being gone. So, I just want to kind of urge you to remember that when you tell the nursing home that you want absolutely everything done for mom or grandma or dad or grandpa or whoever it is, and they're 98 years old and they've got severe heart disease and advanced lung disease, and their kidneys don't work without dialysis, and they don't necessarily have a whole lot of quality of life left. Listen, I'm not saying that they deserve to die. I'm not even saying that they should. But what I'm saying is that everyone deserves the right to choose when and how. You might think that you're doing this loved one a favor by saying, I want absolutely everything done in event of an emergency, no matter what. But you know what that means? That means that this frail little nursing home resident is likely going to have his or her ribs broken during CPR as part of a resuscitative attempt. Because if they stop breathing, if their heart stops beating, if they stop responding, your wishes are that no matter what, they be brought back. And I guess I implore you to think about, what is it that person wants? Are we really doing it for them if we're trying to keep them alive at all costs? And is alive really better? I would argue that it's not always. Sometimes we forget to think about sort of what the end point or the best scenario is. And it's hard not to remember somebody that you love the way that they were. And sometimes I think people have sort of an unrealistic end point or goalpost in mind, where they're thinking that person is eventually going to rehabilitate to the point where they're going to be back to the way that they were before they went into the nursing home or the hospital. And a lot of the time they've been through a lot since they went in, and they've aged a lot since they went in, and they're not necessarily ever going to be capable of finding that endpoint again. So again, I would just urge you to consider that sometimes the most loving thing that you can do for somebody who means a lot to you is to let them go on their own terms and let them have some dignity at the end. Broken ribs suck. That's all. But smoked ribs are absolutely delicious. And look at that. That's what you're looking for. You see how that meat has started to kind of pull away from the bone? That means these are fall apart tender. Let's go sauce them. These look and smell just stupid fucking good, you guys. I wish you could smell this. I want you to see what happened with this barbecue sauce. Now, it's caramelized, it's thickened, it's sludgy, but still runny. It's got a tang from the apple cider vinegar, but the sugars have caramelized, so it's also got a thickness and almost a syrupy quality to it. And you cannot buy that out of a bottle. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna just sort of baste and paint the top of these ribs, and then we're gonna open smoke them for a final hour at 225. And no, smart ass, open smoke does not mean we're gonna leave the lid open, because remember, we don't do that. What we're gonna do is we're just gonna smoke them without wrapping them, because the braising phase is complete. So anyway, while I paint, I'm gonna talk a bit more about my other rib story. So very early on in my wound care career, I got called to see a patient on the northern end of town. I'm in Indianapolis. It was 2009 or 2010. And every once in a while, we'll get a consult that's a little bit ridiculous. Like, look, I'm happy to see anybody who's got a wound, and I'll do it.
with pleasure and with a smile on my face, and I'll give them every bit of my attention and be as kind and compassionate as possible. But sometimes I think, man, do you really want me to get that wound closed, or do you want to maybe fix something on the inside before I do? And this was such a consult, because I went to see this person in the nursing home, and obviously I have to be a little bit vague, but this was a person who had had a pneumonectomy, and that means that a lung had been removed. And even if I remembered why that was, I probably wouldn't be able to tell you. But at any rate, this was a person who had, when I tell you, a gaping hole in the side of their chest, I'm talking about a hole that was big enough to put your fist into and your forearm into. And, again, every once in a while I think, man, cart before the horse a little bit. Like, I was asked to see another person one week who, because of their dementia, had clawed at their fresh pacemaker incision long enough that the pacemaker had actually come out of the chest and was kind of dangling there by the wires and looked a little bit like Flavor Flav's clock. And, I think maybe it's a bad idea for me to heal that wound before, I don't know, you call the cardiologist and you put the heart back in. But I don't know. I mean, that's just me. Anyway, I took the dressing off of this person's chest, just a superficial dressing. And when I tell you, I could not only see every rib in that man's chest, but I could see his heart. I could see his diaphragm moving up and down as he breathed. And the wildest thing to me, as I took more and more and more of this rolled gauze packing out of his chest and saw more and more and more of what looked like an anatomy textbook that I had had to memorize to get my degree, I realized that without his chest packed, when he spoke, his voice echoed, and he sounded very much like Darth Vader. And if you're not a Star Wars person, shame on you. But also, no, just shame on you, honestly. You know who you are. So the cool thing about it was that, besides the fact that I could literally see all these things that ordinarily you have to cut someone open while they're under general anesthesia to see, I'm telling you, I could have put my arm to the elbow inside of this man's chest. I could have held his heart in my hand if I had thought that was a good idea. And if I had, I would probably not still be practicing with a license in Indiana, because that is not a good idea, especially in a non-sterile nursing home setting, if ever. So at any rate, what I found was that he talked to me and his voice sounded very echoed like this. And then I would put my hand over the hole in his chest and the echo would go away. And I would take it away and the echo would come back, and I would put it back and the echo would go away. And I don't know. I just thought that was really cool. Oh my God, stop it. So this is what the finished ribs look like. And this is what I saw when I looked inside that person's chest. So when I talk about fall apart tender, this is exactly what I'm talking about. I went to cut those ribs into individual ribs for eating purposes, and they just sort of shredded. They fell apart. And that's what they ought to do when they are done properly. They look and smell absolutely incredible. They're gonna taste incredible. Got some reserved sauce on the side for dipping if I need it. Got some ooey gooey mac and cheese with a little bit of hot sauce on top. And I'm gonna get into it. So I'm just gonna dip one of these and take a taste. When I tell you that's the best barbecue that I've ever had, you're gonna say, well, it's because you're in Indiana, dude, and heard. And I can't dispute that, but it's really good. And I would challenge any of you to put yours up against this. Spectacular. Let's try the mac and cheese. All right, let's do this. Good Lord. So the hot sauce sets it off perfectly. It's gooey. It's got a cheese pull to it. It's creamy. It's chewy, but not in a way that suggests that the pasta's overdone. Rather, it's chewy because we stopped short of al dente when we cooked the pasta and let it finish in the sauce. So that starch kind of infused the cheese sauce and vice versa. And it's toothsome and hearty and comforting. Wow. Home run, you guys. Wow. Really good. Wish every one of you could smell and taste this. Thanks for coming. Come on back. See what we're up to next. I don't fucking know.